All right, viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good day and welcome to this interestingly enthralling interview and a special one I'm recording today on Wednesday, the 16th of October, 2024, a few weeks or days to the American election, which is coming up on November the 5th this year, 2024. My guest is Leah Entenmann from the U.S. state of Wisconsin, which is one of the battlegrounds, a state that is called, or one of the states that are called the swing states that determine who becomes the next president of the United States of America. She is from there and she's doing a PhD. She has a relationship, a research relationship with Nigeria, as she has written and studied a lot about Yoruba land and Yoruba culture and stuff like that. So we feel like we have a connection to her. She's here on my show via Zoom to talk about what is ahead of the U.S. election in terms of young people's participation to the election and the current political climate between the two candidates, one of which is said to be a convicted criminal and the other is said to have been convicting criminals for long in her career, talking about the former Donald Trump and the latter Kamala Harris. Well, Leah, thank you very much indeed for speaking to me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
How do you feel given the fact that someone living in Nigeria is interested in the American politics and is hosting on YouTube and radio talk shows experts from different parts of the US and different parts of the world to analyze the happenings and the elections and the politics of your country? How do you feel that? How do you feel?
I think it makes perfect sense. The United States has something like 4% of the world's population, and yet we have all of this power, this economic, military, political power that is really disproportionate and affects a lot of people beyond our borders.
Well, of course, but I was listening to a program on Molecular Radio in the UK, and one of the experts being interviewed on the show was talking about the fact that a lot of people in Singapore are very much enthusiastic about the US election and they know a lot about the American politics. But on the other way around, the people in the United States of America tend not to know almost anything or many things about other people's politics and elections and stuff like that. Why do you think this happens? And does this surprise you?
Growing up in the United States, it does not surprise me at all. I think we have a culture here that is very self-centered, very ethnocentric. I think that's the case in a lot of places, but in the United States, we also have like this powerhouse of popular culture that is sort of self-referential, and all of our conversations are pretty limited to our borders, and not only our borders, but our states. The United States has other territories like Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and of course, allies around the world. And we don't know much about any of that. We're not taught about it in school. And so it is perhaps a minority of people in the United States who can name the president of Nigeria. Well, it is definitely a minority of people in the United States who can name the president.
Yeah, I was watching one of my friends studying, journalism, digital journalism at university, and he was asking me about the name of the US president. I was like, oh my God, this is something basic that you should have known long ago. I mean, I think a lot of Nigerians should know who is ruling the United States, who is occupying the Oval Office. To me, because this is my business, I've been doing this for more than a decade, following the American politics, presenting different types of programs, both on the radio and outside the normal journalism platforms. But then you said, in your schools, students are not taught issues of other countries, isn't it a negativity? Isn't
Right.
it a weakness of the United States of America? Or it's like the government wants to control the narrative that okay, the Americans should always be taught about America and not other countries' affairs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally think it's a major shortcoming. There are a lot of problems with education in the United States. There's actually it's very political in terms of political parties. There is a debate over what kind of history should be taught, whether it's fair to teach white students about the bad things that white people have done in the past in the United States, because it might hurt their feelings. And and I don't know. I find that really distasteful. The idea that we should cover up the atrocities committed that helped form what the United States is today, both in terms of atrocities committed within our borders and beyond. But in terms of education about the world around us, I remember in middle school, I had a class on, I can't remember what it was called, but we learned about things like GDP and I don't know, like basic about other countries, and something else in high school. But really, the focus of the curriculum is on United States history, United States civics, and yet most of us still have trouble understanding that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that is why you have a lot of people in America, not only in America, but in the Western world, that think Africa is a country, not a continent. And that is
Right.
problematic. That is problematic to us. It hurts our feelings to see an American or someone from the West, one of the Western countries, thinking that Africa is a country and Nigeria is the capital of that so-called African country. I think a lot of people share the sentiment that the US should do more unless it is deliberately trying not to should liberalize or secularize or democratize education, if I can put it this way.
Right, right. No, I think that's a completely on point critique. A lot of people within the United States share that critique,
Mm.
and yet it's difficult to make policy change in terms of what gets covered in public schools.
Yeah, definitely. So let's now move on. What is your connection to Nigeria? Because I've read your profile and I've seen that you're studying something about Yoruba culture. Briefly, if you could like merge it with your little bit of biography. Who is Leah Entenmann? I hope I'm pronouncing the surname correctly. And why are you interested in Nigeria and Yoruba culture?
So I became interested in Africa in general when I was in college. My best friend was a refugee from Somalia, and I wound up doing study abroad in East Africa, in Uganda, Rwanda, and Tanzania. Um, and then in my master's program, my master's in public policy, I did research on Ugandan law regarding gender and sexuality, and how that related to colonial law that has been passed down and kept intact in the independent nation of Uganda. But I between my master's program and starting my PhD program, I worked for nonprofit organizations, mostly anti-violence organizations. I worked for a rape crisis center. I worked for a legal rights center providing services to people facing with legal problems that can be violent. So I guess it's sort of a complicated conception in terms of like that being anti-violence, but the criminal legal system can be very violent against poor people and people of color. So that's how I roll that in there. And a human rights organization as well. So I wound up deciding to go back to school to get a PhD in cultural anthropology because I started teaching a class, an anthropology class at John Jay College in New York City. And when I was conceptualizing what I wanted to research for my PhD, I wanted to focus on Africa, but I had been reading a lot of literature by Nigerian women authors, and that sort of inspired me to shift my focus west, and look at gender and sexuality in Nigeria. So now my research interest is on relationships between people, romantic relationships, and family relationships, and how people manage when relationships with their families are disrupted.
Okay, that's fantastic. I don't know, why did you particularly pick interest in Yoruba land and culture, which is a tribe located in the southwestern part of Nigeria? Why not southeast, where predominantly are the Igbo people living there? And why not northern Nigeria, where we all live, for example? Is there any specific reason, or is just random thing?
That is an excellent question. I wanted to study population that has religious pluralism, and there are, I think, a majority of Yoruba people are Christian, but there are also many, many Muslims. I am also interested in comparing the legacies of French versus British colonialism and their Yoruba people in both Nigeria and Benin. And also it's a little bit easier to find language instruction in Yoruba than in Hausa or Igbo.
Mm. And what do you mean? Are you trying to say that Igbo language and Hausa language do not have a lot of literature, do not have a lot of like writing books, stuff like that?
No, there are more classes in the United States. There are more universities teaching Yoruba than either Hausa or Igbo.
Okay, yeah, I understand. So that's why you got. So how much do you know about Nigeria as a country? I'm sure you are not among those people who thought or who are thinking that Africa is a country and Nigeria is the capital. How much do you know about Nigeria?
Oh, I am still learning. There's so much to know. There's so much to learn. I know I know more about pre-colonial Yoruba history than pre-colonial any other ethnic group history. I know about British colonization, some of the industrialization, and the military dictatorships after independence. But there is so much yet to learn, and I am so eager to know more, especially about these populations like Hausa that I have not been as exposed to.
Yeah, definitely. So you interested in coming to our state, Kano, and a couple of other northern states?
Absolutely. I have a colleague in the anthropology department. He is currently doing research in northern Nigeria, and he is from, I can't remember what city he's from, but he's from northern Nigeria, and we've talked about the possibility of me visiting and ideas he has for things I should see.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be delighted to see you one day in our state. And of course, we are rich in culture and tradition. There's a lot of interesting things for any European or American tourist to come and see and explore in northern Nigeria, particularly where we live in Kano State. I'm sure when you come, you will be delighted to see amazing stuff, and you will want to live forever in our state, I believe. Yeah, definitely. So let's now move on. In I don't know whether this sounds personal. If it does, then you can ask me to pass it over. But then in your profile on the internet, I have seen that you don't identify yourself as a she or her, you identify as they. Is there any wisdom behind that?
Yeah. So I know this is a conversation that is perhaps not familiar to most Nigerians, and perhaps even not most Americans. But I have a lot of friends who are transgender, who are raised as a boy or a girl as a child, but identify differently as an adult. Um, and uh, and some people who are transgender are non-binary, meaning they don't identify as male or female, and they use gender-neutral pronouns they them instead of he, him, or she, her. I am not transgender, but I don't really care what pronouns people use for me. It's not very tied to my identity. I don't feel insulted when somebody uses gender neutral pronouns for me. So I do like to use gender neutral pronouns in professional and scholarly contexts in order to give people an opportunity to practice with someone whose feelings they won't hurt if they get it wrong. So I am able to correct people, to help people practice and get better at using this pronoun in a new way. And it's easier for me to do than for non-binary transgender people to do, because it's their identity that gets called into question every time someone gets their pronoun wrong. Does
Yeah,
that make sense? It's
yeah, definitely. But then we need,
did I get?
yeah, we need a little bit of clarification here. Does it mean you will get annoyed if someone identifies you as a she or her?
If someone identifies me as she or her, I will not get annoyed. It doesn't hurt my feelings, not at all. Um, I think when I'm teaching classes, I'm trying to get people to understand how to do this. But especially in intercultural contexts where people don't have the same background in terms of knowing what kind of culture I'm referencing. I give people a lot of leeway. I'm not bothered if people use she her for me.
Well, no problem. So yeah, that's great. It's clarified. All right, let's now get back to our conversation about American politics and election. We started touching this. The question I'm going to ask you has been a little bit or partially answered, but then let's hit the nail on the head. Why do you think American elections generate, especially the presidential ones, generate more and more global attention?
Well, I think since Donald Trump came on the scene, the stakes have been much higher. He is, where to start saying what he is? He's dangerous, I think is the first word I would use for him. He is reckless. He is hateful, and he is violent. He has also he has no respect for the rule of law. He has no respect for the tradition of democracy. He has no respect for the will of the American people.
Oh my God.
So, for example,
Before you give you an example, I'm sorry to cut you off. These are two harsh words and expressions used by you to describe your former president who was voted by Americans like you. I'm not saying you voted for him, but who was voted by Americans, and now you're just describing him as dangerous, reckless, somebody who has no regard for the law and so on and so forth. Is that not a problem? Because I mean, he and his followers would accuse you of sort of insulting their own favorite candidate, former president.
yeah, absolutely, they would. This is obviously my opinion, but I do think that my opinion is backed up by reality. Um, Trump, former President Trump, tells lies, for example, claiming that Haitian immigrants in the state of Ohio are kidnapping people's pets, their cats and dogs, and eating them. That was something he said in a presidential debate. And as a result, the city of Springfield, Ohio, has been dealing with bomb threats. And Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are afraid to leave their homes. He makes these statements in order to make people angry and make people scared, and rally to his side. He doesn't care that it's harming real people. And this is just one recent example of him telling lies that lead to violence. The way he handled the COVID epidemic was extraordinarily dangerous. I think hundreds of thousands more people died because of his poor management of the outbreak, and the lies he has told about the disease. In 2020, he refused to acknowledge that he had lost the presidential race. And we saw the first attack on the U.S. Capitol. Actually, I can't remember if that even happened during the Civil War in the 1800s. So we have seen disruptions to American life that, I mean, I never in my wildest dreams would have thought would happen. And the political conversation in the United States has changed so much over the past 10 years, since Donald Trump became a serious part of national level politics, that families are torn apart by people disagreeing over whether or not immigrants have human rights, whether or not the police have the right to shoot people who are unarmed, over all of these topics that were already controversial. But now people are digging in so much deeper, and Donald Trump sort of sets the tone for that conversation. There's just so much.
Yeah. Are you trying to say that America made a mistake in 2016 by voting for Donald Trump, by making him the leader of the free world, by making him the president of the United States of America, and that they may, or they could, make the same mistake in 2024?
Absolutely. Our electoral system is kind of, well, it's problematic. It's kind of, he did not win the popular vote in 2016. The majority of people in the States voted against him. But because of the electoral college system, where whoever wins the majority of the vote in a particular state gets the entire state, because of that system, we wound up with him as president. This is also what happened with George W. Bush in the year 2000. So I think the electoral college system itself is a mistake. And I am disheartened and frightened by the number of people who are supporting Trump this time.
Okay. So would you say that the U.S. electoral college system is unfair and that it needs to be scrubbed?
Absolutely.
So if you have a position of power, would you scrub it?
Oh, today. Yes, absolutely. I believe it should be one person should have one vote. It should not be winner take all in terms of the votes of the state. I think in the United States, we're sort of raised to believe that democracy is the one correct way to run a country. But we don't really follow democracy in a pure form in the United States. And that seems like a major problem and sort of a cognitive dissonance in terms of what we as Americans believe we are and what we do.
So, okay, given all this, can we say that the US is not purely democratic?
I am comfortable saying that the United States is not purely democratic, both because of the Electoral College issue and also because of the influence of money in politics. Corporations are allowed to make enormous campaign contributions. And then, like, regardless of who is allowed to make these campaign contributions, which campaign has the most money often determines who wins, because the campaigns with the most money are able to put the most resources in to win people to their side, win people's votes. That means that lower income people don't have access to power, don't have access to campaign resources, and cannot run and cannot represent the interests of lower income people.
I mean, this is an interesting revelation. Having an American proving that American politics is so expensive that it is deterring poor people, despite their qualities, from participating in one political career or in one political position or the other, participating in the politics at large. Okay, I don't know. The US is very good, very much good at criticizing other people's democracy. The US can lambast, can criticize Iran for not being purely democratic, for infringing on the rights of women and stuff like that. The US can say North Korea is undemocratic. Forget about North Korea, but China and Russia are among the biggest enemies or competitors or adversaries of the United States of America, and both claim to be democracy in their own way, democracies in their own way. Right now, we have the United States of America and an American citizen, an expert like you, trying to say that American democracy is not pure simply because of two things: the Electoral College system and now the expensive nature of politics, something that we are battling with here in Nigeria. Another question.
Absolutely.
Another question. I don't know whether it's going to land safely in your mind. Can we say, given all this, that the US is undemocratic? Some people would have this question, and I know some people may say it's too simplistic to say that, but what's your take? Is the US undemocratic looking at this?
That's a good question. And it is, well, the yes or no part of it is a little complicated. I think we have structures in place to facilitate democracy. We have a national sort of narrative or myth, an origin myth that focuses on democracy as the key principle, as the key method of human liberation in a governmental situation. And yet we have all of these other factors that influence who has access to power. And that includes not only the wealth or lack thereof of the candidates themselves and their campaigns, and the Electoral College, which we discussed, but also things like the history of voter suppression of people of color, particularly Black people, and Native American people. And we have, I think it was in 2015, the United States Supreme Court overturned the Voting Rights Act, which was enacted in response to the civil rights movement and their activism to protect Black people's right to vote. So when that act was overturned, a lot of states started using new methods of voter suppression, like requiring certain forms of identification in order to vote, like closing polling locations, so you have to wait longer to vote. I think it was the state of Georgia that now bans or prohibits people from passing out water to people standing in line to vote. So there are all kinds of different ways that...
When you say passing out water, I'm sorry to cut you off. When you say the state of Georgia has prohibited passing out of water to the people in line of voting, what does that mean? Does it mean like spitting on them because of their race or something like that? What does that mean?
No. It means that like volunteer organizations are no longer able to hand out bottled water to the people waiting to vote. And so if people are waiting in line for hours and hours, they may get dehydrated, they may be thirsty,
yeah.
But these volunteers can no longer give out water for free.
Why?
That's a very good question. I know they have some sort of justification for banning this, but I don't know what it could be. I can't think of any real reason.
Yeah, generally speaking, some people would say it's an act of kindness to hand out a bottle of water to someone living or staying in the sun for fear of being dehydrated or something like that. But then the government is saying, no, it's prohibited. Isn't it inhumane? I don't want to sound harsh, but isn't it inhumane? But on the other hand, maybe some people might say, no, some of those volunteer organizations could be used or manipulated by one politician or the other to serve a particular political purpose. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they have banned it, right?
You should double check whether it's Georgia, because I'm not 100% sure. But I'm sure the lawmakers have some kind of concern or something like that. But this is affecting people who are standing in long lines. And the reason people are standing in long lines is because polling locations have been closed in their communities, so there are fewer places to vote. And the communities where these polling locations are being closed are largely communities of color and low-income communities. So in Georgia, particularly Black communities are facing longer times waiting to vote and the risk of becoming dehydrated. And now they're not allowed to get free water from volunteers.
That's fantastic. I think let me jump the gun. I have decoded and deciphered that you are anti-Trump and you could possibly vote for Kamala Harris on November the 5th. Is that true?
That is accurate.
Okay. Then why are you going to vote for Kamala Harris this coming election?
Kamala Harris is not my favorite candidate of all time.
Oh.
I am very excited to have a woman. I'm very excited to have a Black person, a South Asian person, the daughter of immigrants as the executive in chief. I'm very excited to defeat Donald Trump. I am a lot more progressive.
You sound too personal. You're saying that you are very excited to defeat Donald Trump.
Yes. I am excited for us to defeat. I'm excited for her to defeat Donald Trump. Yes. Not do it on my own, alas. But I'm critical of some of her policies. My biggest concern, and also I should preface this by saying I am very far left. I am very progressive. I'm not moderate. I will not pretend to be unbiased. But I have been concerned about the human rights of Palestinians for decades. And now there is a genocide of Palestinians that the United States is funding, that the United States is arming, And I am, if I may speak freely, I am absolutely disgusted. I am outraged. I am so angry, so sad that our country is supporting the elimination of a group of humans. It's not the first time our country has been complicit in genocide. It's not the first time our country has participated in genocide, for example, of Native Americans. But the fact that our progressive leaders like Joe Biden are willing to keep on sending money, keep on sending weapons to Israel, when Israel is not only attacking Palestinians, they're also going after Lebanese people. They have bombed Syria, they have bombed Yemen. They, it is.
I understand. It's outrageous. It's catastrophic and ferociously, devastating. All the terrible adjectives, all the negative adjectives cannot even be enough to describe the atrocities committed there. I understand that you started to sound highly emotional. Do you feel bad that the American government is using your taxpayer money to fund and arm Israel, committing, in your own words, genocide in the Middle East?
Yes. I am not surprised, because the United States, I think the government is very hypocritical, especially in terms of foreign relations. We claim to be promoting democracy, promoting human rights, and we do that sometimes. The government is not a monolith. There are agencies within it that are very focused on democracy and human rights. And yet our military strategy, our economic strategy is extremely destructive and exploitative. And one problem that voters like me, voters who are very progressive, who are aware of the world beyond us, one problem that we run into is that we're sort of stuck voting for either somebody who is extremely dangerous or somebody who is slightly less dangerous. And I think a lot of young people in particular are having trouble reconciling their opposition to genocide, to war, to so many of these morally reprehensible sort of acts of complicity or enablement. We're having trouble reconciling the fact that we need to protect against Donald Trump by voting for someone who will continue to fund Israel's war campaign, genocide of the Palestinian people.
Well, I don't know. The Americans have found themselves now between the devil and the deep blue sea, trying to choose between the lesser of two evils. I don't know. Okay, you've already made up your mind that you're not voting for Donald Trump, you're anti-Trump. But some people would say between 2016 and 2020, there was no genocide in Gaza, there was no war in Lebanon, and he too has praised himself, as he has been doing so narcissistically, that under his watch there was no major invasion of any country. Georgia was invaded somewhere around 2006 under George W. Bush. Syria or Ukraine, Crimea was invaded in 2014 during Obama. In 2022, the whole Ukraine was invaded by Russia in 2022 under Joe Biden's presidency. It's only, as he said, in Donald Trump's presidency that no country was invaded by another. I think maybe looking at this, you could say, let's vote for him. Maybe he could be the best person to end the war in Gaza by simply picking up a phone and call Netanyahu and say, hey, you got to stop this. Since they're best friends, we know that.
Yeah, he does make that kind of argument. He claims that if he were in charge, there would be a lot less violence, and yet he was willing to sort of raise the temperature in the nuclear arms race and threaten nuclear war. He has his rhetoric shows that he values some humans much less than other humans.
Oh.
He is he is extremely Islamophobic. He does not value Muslim lives. And I think if he were in charge, things would be significantly worse for Palestinians. I think he would not expect Netanyahu to, so I think Netanyahu already believes he can do what he wants with American aid without consequence. But I think Trump would cheer him on.
Okay. I don't know. Yeah, definitely. There's no way you can do justice to Trump. Another argument is that he claims that under his watch, the American economy did better than the American economy under Biden. I don't want to say under Obama, but he said the American economy was fantastic. It did well under his watch. What can you say about this? Is it another lie that one of the lies he has been saying?
Right. Well, for one thing, presidents don't actually have that much control over the economy at all. And for another thing, COVID threw the economy completely off track. So I think the changes in the United States economy have much more to do with the disruptions of the epidemic, or the pandemic rather. And also supply chain issues affecting commerce in the United States, that these issues happened outside of the United States and outside the control of the president.
Okay.
Also, Donald Trump doesn't have clear economic plans. The plans he has offered, economists have analyzed and said that they would do much more harm than good.
I don't know. A lot of people believe that Donald Trump has a special relationship with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. And he has been saying it that he would solve the Ukrainian conflict, the Ukrainian war, the invasion of Ukraine. He would end it in less than 24 hours. Don't you think that maybe because of this, the Americans could give him the chance to do that, since he has a relationship with the Russian president, that maybe he could pick up a phone and say, oh, hey, Putin, you got to stop this. Or let's talk about a deal. Let's talk a deal and strike a deal and find a way out so that more blood would not be spilled.
I don't trust anything Trump says to begin with, anything at all. I don't think he has the social or emotional intelligence to manipulate someone into giving him what he wants. I don't trust his the way he weights different factors. I don't trust him to bargain in a way that preserves human safety. I think he would be much more willing than most Americans, most Westerners, to say, okay, Russia, you can take this part of Ukraine, and then the war will be over. So I don't think Donald Trump has awareness of the history or the politics or the economics of the situation to understand what is really motivating Putin what is motivating Zelensky or any of the other Western actors. Yeah, I
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't think he can really do anything.
Okay. It's one of the Trump plans um, to get America out of all those alliances and stop funding all those alliances, which means NATO would be at risk, WHO would be at risk, the United Nations and the rest would be at risk.
I am very, very critical of the United States military strategy in the world, presence in the world. I think NATO is problematic. It serves very important functions, but it can also be very harmful.
Yeah.
But I think the isolationism that Donald Trump wants to pursue will be harmful for the people of the United States as well as the world in general. The United States needs to be a participant, a more responsible participant, I think, in intergovernmental organizations like the United Nations. And I mean, I think the United States already is not collaborative enough, cooperative enough with other countries to pursue common goals like preventing climate catastrophe. So further isolation will cause more harm than good.
All right. I want to ask you about China. I don't know whether you have a particular opinion about the U.S. relations with China, but then one more question about Kamala Harris. You said you are against Biden administration simply because of his policy of funding and supporting and arming the Israelis committing genocide in Gaza. And you said you are not going to vote for Donald Trump. Won't you regret after voting for Kamala Harris simply because she is a part of this Biden administration? We call it a Biden-Harris administration. And now if she gets into the Oval Office, she may likely carry on with most, if not all, of the Biden policies, including arming, supporting, and funding the Israelis. Isn't it something that
Yes,
you should be concerned about? That you're going to vote for someone that would continue to be funding and arming and supporting the genocide?
yeah, I think one thing that is really challenging for a lot of Americans is that you can never vote for your whole belief system in a presidential election. You have to vote based on doing the least harm, based on the reality that if one person elected, a certain set of outcomes are likely, and if the other person is elected, some of those same outcomes are still likely, but others are going to be different. And we have a system partially due to this finance issue in terms of the influence of money in these campaigns. We have a system where you really, if you want your vote to count, it has to be for one of these two candidates. I think if I were still living in New York City and I were confident that the state of New York is going to vote, the votes are going to go for Kamala Harris. That's very likely. It's a reliably blue state, meaning the votes go for Democrats. I might consider voting for a third party candidate, someone who more closely represents my values. But because I live in Wisconsin, I have to be very strategic. I have to do my part to make sure these votes for this state go to Kamala Harris.
Okay. And you think Kamala Harris may be a little bit better than Joe Biden in terms of ending the war in Gaza, even though I don't think she talked much during the debate about her plans for ending the war in Gaza. But by the way, she was not happy with Benjamin Netanyahu when he went to Congress and delivered a speech. I think she did not meet him or something like that. But are you happy? Are you confident that she may have a plan, tangible one, to see the end of the war in Gaza?
I am not confident that she will see the end of the war. I do think she is a little more critical of Israel. I think politicians, especially Democrats, are sort of stuck in what they're able to say about it because there is a very strong, very well-funded lobby supporting Israel. And I'm not just talking about a Jewish lobby. I'm talking about fundamentalist Christians who believe Israel the land needs to belong to the Jews because of their own beliefs. There is a lot of money supporting candidates who are pro-Israel, and a lot of money going towards sabotaging the candidacy of candidates like Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, the only Palestinian national level representative in U.S. history. She was voted out due in large part to this funding machine running attack ads against her. So in order to keep that funding from going towards discrediting them, ruining their campaigns, a lot of Democratic politicians have to sort of fall in line in support of Israel. So I think there's a limit to what politicians can say publicly. I think my perception is that Joe Biden would not criticize Israel, even if he had more room to do so. I think he believes strongly that he has said that Israel, as a Jewish state, is the only way that Jews in the world will be safe. Which I think Ta-Nehisi Coates, an American journalist, recently pointed out that's a very dangerous thing to say, that you will not protect Jews in your own country, that this other country has to exist in order for Jews to be safe. I'm sorry, I'm going a little off topic. But,
no, I understand. Now, this is perfectly something that I'm particularly interested in. But then, I don't know, regarding Kamala Harris, you're not confident that she's not going to see the end of the war in Gaza, and you're still voting for her. If someone were to advise you not to vote for anybody, would you consider it?
No.
Okay.
I would not consider it.
What about voting for Jill Stein, who is the Green Party candidate? I don't know that you know about her.
Yes, I'm aware of her. Well, again, because I live in Wisconsin, because it's going to come down to so few people's votes deciding which way the state's votes go. I think I need to use my vote as strategically as possible. So again, if I were in a solidly Democratic state, I would definitely consider voting for someone like Jill Stein or maybe Cornel West. But because of where I live, where my vote is, I need to follow this two-party system and do what I can to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president again.
Very good. We have less than 10 minutes to go. I would like you to explain the concept of the swing state system that you have in the United States of America, in which your state, Wisconsin is a part of. When we say swing state, or first of all, to start with the basics, when we say red and blue states, what does that mean? And then swing states, what are they, and what do they do, and how influential are they in deciding who becomes the U.S. president?
Right. So red refers to Republican and blue refers to Democrat. Right also refers to conservative or Republican. Left refers to progressive, liberal, or Democrat. Some states are described as purple, a mix of blue and red. But yeah, so that's sort of the situation with the swing states. It's not certain ahead of time, or you can't really predict ahead of time which way they're going to go, which way the votes will be allocated. Because again, it's not
simply because there are lots of undecided voters in the state.
Right. People who are not loyal to one party or the other. Well, actually, it might be less that there are a lot of undecided people and more that the margin is so close that there are very even numbers of red versus blue voters. And that leaves just those few undecided people who are going to determine which way the state's votes go.
All right.
And again, because the state's votes are all or nothing. Winner takes all. So the majority, whoever gets the majority of individual votes will get the entirety of the state's votes. And also, different states have a different number of electoral college votes. So Wisconsin, for example, I'm not sure how many we have, but California, I think, has the largest population of any state and has the most electoral college votes. And fortunately, I will say fortunately, California is a reliably Democratic state.
Yeah, but Kamala Harris is from California.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So that shows that California is already a democratic state and they're voting for Kamala Harris.
Right.
Okay, right. Definitely.
Democrats have tried to get candidates from southern states so that they will put those states into question as to whether they will vote red or blue, because usually southern states vote red.
All right.
But in this year's election, we don't have that at play.
Okay, let's see if we can quickly take these questions about China. I said, how do you see China? Is it an adversary, an enemy of the United States of America, or a competitor? What could you say? What's your personal opinion, your personal take about the relationship between China and the US, and whether or not the way your governments, both Republican and Democrat, have been sustaining or dealing with the relationship?
Right. I don't know all that much about the ins and outs of relations between China and the United States. I have a personal connection to China. My dad was a professor of East Asian history, and I visited China and studied Mandarin. And I lived in Taiwan as an exchange student for a year. So my impression of China, Chinese people, Chinese culture is very much shaped by the people, not so much by the government. But I think the rhetoric in the United States, instead of being about competition, let alone collaboration, which is what I would like to see in the world, instead of being about competition, it's been about sort of adversarial relationship in terms of these are our enemies. And that doesn't totally make sense to me. I think most of the competition between the United States and China is economic, not military. So I think there is sort of a needless antipathy or a needless antagonism towards China on the part of American politicians.
Okay.
I do think the Chinese government is very problematic. Just because the United States has its problems doesn't mean we can't also criticize other countries for their problems. But I see a lot of sort of shutting down understanding, intercultural understanding,
Yeah.
rather than really talking about just economic
Yeah, so
concerns.
for you, the Chinese people are very good people and they're accommodating. Your relationship with them is not aggressive, something like that. The only problem is government to government relations, isn't you? Even though there is a Chinese embassy, I believe, in Washington D.C. and maybe Chinese consulates in California, Los Angeles, and other places, and there are the same thing. U.S. mission in Beijing. The US does not have an embassy in Taiwan. It has an embassy in Beijing, in the mainland China. Um, I don't know if okay, if you were to be asked on how to manage the relations between China and the United States of America, what would you do?
Oh wow, that is so far beyond my expertise. I really don't know. I I would definitely dial down the rhetoric, try to set a tone that's more collaborative,
Mm.
and collaborative, at least competitive instead of antagonistic.
Mm.
Um, I yeah, I would want to promote intellectual and cultural exchange. Um, I would want to encourage people to learn Chinese in the United States. Well, Americans need to learn other languages in general. We're very problematic.
And need
Well,
to know more about the world around them.
yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah. Track, we have 1 minute to go. Thank you very much indeed, Leah Entenmann, for speaking to me on my show. What can you say about this interview and the topic we covered, the kind of stuff we've talked about?
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. You've asked some fantastic questions, and really challenged me to think through some of the things that have been brewing in my head, this election season, and think about it on a more global scale. So yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate your show. I appreciate your listeners and viewers. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and we're looking forward to one day meeting in person, either in Nigeria or in the US.
Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. Thank you very much. And by the way, before we go, you said your dad was a professor, right? Is he still alive?
Yeah, he died in January.
Oh, so sorry for this great loss. So sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on behalf of everyone that has contributed to the production of the show, my name is Umar Isa Dandago, saying goodbye and see you very soon. Many thanks to Leah Entenmann from the U.S. state of Wisconsin. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Yeah, you too.